Welcome to the Not Old Better Show. Today and just now, I spoke with Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, who joined me from his office at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. As scientists mark the 100th anniversary of the Spanish influenza pandemic, labs around the country are hunting and, as Dr. Fauci puts it to us today, chasing better vaccines to boost protection against ordinary winter flu and guard against future pandemics, too.
As I referred to it, chase the flu. You got to figure out what's going to happen next year. Let's anticipate it and make a vaccine that would be best matched to what we anticipate we'll see the following year.
That, of course, is our guest today, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci tells us more about the severity of this flu season, the current state of the vaccine, which some view as flawed, and talks about why the universal influenza vaccine is so important. Well, Dr. Anthony Fauci, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Well, Dr. Fauci, with snow on the ground here in the Washington, D.C. area and more cold weather in the forecast, many will be staying indoors, further exacerbating the flu issues. And experts are predicting, including you, that this flu season is going to be severe. So compare for us a severe year versus another or any other year. What makes this such a bad year for the flu?
That's an excellent question, and people, always ask, what do you mean by a bad year? So if you look at let's say the last 8 or 9 years or so, and you plot the number of cases of flu, when they start, when they peak, when they come down, you can see that over the years, there are some years that are light, there are some years that are moderate, and there are some years that are severe. And I'll explain in a moment what I mean by severe. So if you do the comparison, no doubt the 2017-18 is a bad influenza year. Another bad year was 2014 and 15. Another bad year was 2012-13. So we're on that plot on the bad side of the cluster of years that we've had in the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Now, what do you mean by a bad year? You can measure it by a number of things. You can measure it by the number of projected deaths or real deaths after the season is over. So you can't really tell now until the season is over. You measure it by hospitalizations. You measure it by a variety of other parameters. So why do you have a bad year? There are a number of factors. About 3 of them are the predominant ones. The first thing is, what is the nature of the virus that's circulating? So every year in the community, when we have an outbreak like clockwork every winter, it's about 3 or 4 viruses that circulate. Usually within the last several years, it's been an H3N2, an H1N1, and an influenza B. Usually 2 Bs circulate. And that's the reason why when you and I get our vaccines, we don't get vaccinated just against a single virus. We get vaccinated against a cluster of 3 or 4. Now, when you have an outbreak, the H3N2 this year is dominating. So there's no such a thing as all the viruses dominating at the same time. There's usually one that stands out. And in this year, it's the H3N2. And historically, H3N2 is a bad actor. By bad actor, I mean it's one that's associated with more severe disease. It's one that's associated with the complications, particularly among the susceptible people for complications like the elderly, people with chronic diseases, people with pregnant women, and very young children. So we're starting off right from square one that we have a bad virus. The next thing is what kind of immunity is in the background. Namely, what did you experience last year and the year before to give you some background protection? If you haven't seen a virus that is very similar to this, there's not going to be a lot of background protection. And then importantly is, what is the efficacy of the vaccine? Namely, how well does it protect you? And this year, the vaccine is not really optimal in the sense that in the making of the vaccine, when it was grown, the virus was grown in eggs, and that's unfortunately the way we still make vaccines, which are for influenza, that is, which has a bit antiquated, that it changed a bit as the virus was growing in the eggs, and we have a bit of a mismatch. So you put all of those things together, and you wind up with a bad year. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. It's similar somewhat to 2014 and 15. If you go to the CDC website and you look at the plot, it almost superimposes itself in numbers and in kinetics, or which means the dynamics of how the virus appears, peaks, and then starts to come down. It looks very much like 2014-15 and also a little bit like 2012 and 13.
Dr. Fauci, you've also advocated for a universal influenza vaccine that may overcome some of this, the potential for flaws, as is the case perhaps this year. How will that help against future seasonal flu?
Sure. Well, flu is somewhat unique among viruses in that it continually changes. We refer to it as a drift from season to season. When you have a big change that leads to a pandemic, that's referred to as a shift. So influenza continually changes, which is the reason why among the vaccines, it's unique that in order to be protected optimally, you have to get a vaccine every year because you have to continue to, as I referred to it, chase the flu. You got to figure out what's going to happen next year. Let's anticipate it and make a vaccine that would be best matched to what we anticipate we'll see the following year. And since it takes several months to make a vaccine, you have to make that choice several months in advance. So the part of the virus, the flu virus, that you want the body to make an immune response against to protect you, unfortunately, is that part of the virus that changes from season to season, necessitating this trying to play catch up and getting a new, better vaccine each year. When I talk about, and my colleagues talk about, a universal flu vaccine, it's to get a vaccine that induces a response in the recipient, in the vaccinee, against that part of the virus that does not change from year to year. Because if you look at the structure of the virus, it has a molecule which we refer to as hemagglutinin, and that's where you get the H when we describe and categorize the vaccines or the viruses themselves. So there are parts of the virus that change from year to year, and that's what we generally make a response against. And when you hit it right, it's good. It can protect you. But what we really need to do is to make a vaccine that induces an immune response to that part of the virus that does not change. And up to now, that's been difficult to do because the body tends to like to make a response against that component of the virus that does change. It's called a dominant part of the virus. So we have to kind of fool the body to make sure it makes a response against that part that doesn't change. And when we get there, and it's not going to be a home run overnight, we're not going to all of a sudden say, okay, tomorrow we have a universal flu vaccine. It's a scientific challenge, and we're already, I think, making really good progress, but it's not going to be for another few years until we actually start seeing what we can call, universal flu vaccine 1.0. It's going to be multiple iterations until we get the optimal one, but we're starting on our way to getting to that first version of it.
Well, despite the efficacy of the current version of the vaccine, reports indicate that getting a flu shot will reduce severity of flu symptoms and that being vaccinated may protect you against other infections. Is that a correct statement?
No. The first part of your statement is absolutely correct. The second part is not. The influenza vaccine will protect you against influenza. It will not protect you against respiratory syncytial virus or coronavirus or parainfluenza. The vaccine will protect you against that virus to which it's directed. So that's why the second part of what you said is not correct. But the first part is correct. When you look at the efficacy of vaccines, for a variety of complicated reasons, influenza vaccines are not those type of vaccines that are optimally effective. For example, the measles vaccine that you got as a child is about 98 to 99% effective. Polio is over 90% effective. At best, the influenza vaccine is about 60% effective on a good year. On a really bad year, like they had in Australia during their recent winter, the efficacy against H3N2 was only 10%. We don't know for sure what the efficacy this year is going to be against H3N2, but it likely will be better than Australia. So the CDC and I and a number of others are predicting that it's going to be around 30% effective. But you say to yourself, wow, that's low. Does that mean we should not get a vaccine? That's not so at all, because any degree of protection is better than no protection at all. And if you get vaccinated, it can, A, prevent you from actually getting infected, but it also might have the effect that if you do get infected, instead of getting a serious complication or getting hospitalized, it can mitigate the severity of your disease. So the bottom line, we keep telling people, A, you definitely should get vaccinated, even though it isn't a perfect vaccine, and B, it's still not too late to get vaccinated, because people often ask, well, you're into January now, should you really be getting vaccinated? And the answer is, if you have not been vaccinated, the answer to that is definitely yes, because there's a lot more flu ahead of us.
Well, thank you for that. It's always good to talk to you to correct some of these myths that are out there about some of these symptoms and the vaccine and some of these specifics. So let me just get back to this and repeat this important point and ask you again directly, should we still get flu shots this year?
Absolutely, yes. We should get a flu shot if you have not yet gotten your flu shot. It is not too late to get a flu shot that can help to protect you.
Well, Dr. Anthony Fauci, thank you so much for your time today. We'll put up links to the NIH website, to Allergy and Infectious Diseases section, where you are the director. But we sure appreciate all this information and your time today. Stay warm and stay out of this weather.
You too. Thanks a lot. Nice to be with you.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci. My thanks to our guest today, Dr. Anthony Fauci. As director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Fauci is a busy man, but generously gave his time today to update us on the severity of this year's flu outbreak and status. More information from the NIH is available at our website, and we'll post links to everything. Thanks for joining me today. Your time, as always, is valuable, and I always want to bring you the most current reports, research, and stories for the Not Old Better audience. I'm always interested in feedback, and you can leave that at iTunes, Google Play, or send me email at info@notold-better.com. Please stay tuned for our next show, another great one as we talk about better, the Not Old Better Show. Thanks to all.